Bond family cooking in quarantine show. And today, our first cooking video, we're going to make a Middle Eastern inspired dish. My good friend Rebecca taught me how to make this dish when I took a cooking class from her a long time ago. Now she doesn't do cooking classes as much because she's a doula, and so she has a whole new passion in life, but she still is passionate about cooking, and I still love to see whenever she's posting things about things she's cooking up in her kitchen. So she was a great inspiration for me as I was learning how to cook many years ago. So today we're making one of her dishes from her website, which I will post the link to the recipe in the description below. And just so you know, the recipe originally, it's for something that she calls phyllo dough pie or garbanzo bean zucchini pie or something like that. So originally it's a pie, and I am not going to make the pie version of it today. I am just going to make the inside pie, if that makes sense, the inside part of the pie. So I'm making the filling today, and I'm just going to use the filling as part of my dinner. If you ever want to try making the full recipe with the phyllo dough, it's supposed to be wrapped in phyllo dough at the end, and it's heavenly. I recommend you sometime doing that. I could show you how to do it maybe in a future cooking video. I could show you how to work with phyllo dough. I can't eat phyllo dough anymore because I don't eat gluten, so that's why I haven't done the pie in a long time, but maybe I'll do it sometime. Do you have any comments, Ian?
It's really yummy.
All right, so I hope you enjoy our video and use this time of quarantine as a good excuse to get cooking. And hopefully all the ingredients are easy enough and simple enough that you'll have them at home already, or hopefully they'll be easy for you to get. Most of the ingredients that I have in cans and the things like my chicken broth and stuff like that I get at Costco, but you might be able to order online or whatever. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Enjoy. Thank you. Okay, first we're going to start with chopping up our vegetables, starting with the zucchini. The recipe calls for 3 large zucchini, but I had several small zucchini, so I'm using 6 small zucchini instead. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and he will explain to us how to chop a zucchini.
Okay, well, I started off by chopping off either end of the zucchini because those parts aren't particularly tasty. And then I chopped the zucchini in half on like the long way, and then again into quarters. Then I set 2 quarters down next to each other on their flat side. That way I can chop it into these little chunks of zucchini, which we're going to use for our recipe.
All right, the recipe also calls for an onion. You could use a small onion or a medium onion. First, cut it into halves, and then cut each half in half again, so you have fourths. And then I'll have Ian explain the next steps.
So first I'm cutting little slits in the onion. They're about a half an inch apart. So I'm turning it over. I'm gonna cut it right there. And since there's already slits in it, it turns into nice little pieces.
Hi. How's my baby?
The way you know your pan is hot enough is you can throw some water on there, and if it kind of beads up when you throw it on like it is now, then it's hot enough. Now we're adding 3 tablespoons of oil. The recipe calls for olive oil, which is great. I use avocado oil a lot in my cooking because you can cook it up to 500 degrees, and which just makes it really nice. I don't have to worry about it smoking. Butter or ghee would work in this dish also, really anything that you have on hand.
Since we already preheated the pot, the oil should heat up pretty quick, so we can just add the onions right away. The longer the onions cook, the more tasty they'll be.
After the onions have cooked for a few minutes, you can start adding your spices. First, a half a teaspoon of cumin seed, and then a half a teaspoon of salt, and then finally Jeremy's going to add a teaspoon of turmeric.
Let's see if that would kind of balance out. Sure. Okay.
For the cumin seed, you could substitute cumin powder, just use less, maybe a quarter a teaspoon instead if you have the powder, but I recommend getting the cumin seed. It does make a difference to me, and you can just order it on Amazon pretty easily. Okay, now it's time to add all the zucchini. One thing I haven't mentioned is that I've been keeping the stove at about medium. I started it at medium-high, waited till it got hot enough, and then turned it down to medium to kind of stabilize it so that I didn't have everything start burning. And you want to keep it fairly high as you cook down the zucchini, just so that it will help evaporate some of the water that comes out of the zucchini as you cook it. The recipe didn't call for pepper, but I'm adding some pepper because it helps you absorb the good nutrients from the turmeric, and also pepper is just good, so we're going to add some in.
Now I'm rinsing a half cup of white rice in a strainer. You can tell that it's all clean once the water below is running clear.
Then you can add your rice to the zucchini mixture and go ahead and just stir fry the rice a little bit so that it can absorb and get coated in the oil. And it's always kind of tasty to brown up your rice a little bit too. All right, now it's time to add the chicken stock, 2 1/4 cups. The recipe actually calls for vegetable stock, so if you're vegetarian, you're welcome to use vegetable stock. We had chicken stock on hand, so that's what we used. And the recipe says to add half a cup of stock at a time, and I'm assuming that's so that it will heat up faster and then cook down faster, but we just were lazy and added it all in at once. Once the chicken stock was simmering pretty well, I turned the stove down to about medium-low so that it would keep simmering but not simmer at too high of a heat. All right, while that is cooking down, we're going to get our chickpeas ready. We need 2 cans of chickpeas. If you want to use dried chickpeas, just Google how to substitute dried chickpeas for canned ones. You'll have to either soak them overnight or boil them, or both. So canned ones are definitely the easier way to go if you have them. And I recommend rinsing them after you drain them, just to get kind of some of the gooey liquid off of them. And then you'll want to just let them sit in the sink and drain while your rice is cooking down. If you find these little shell things in your chickpeas, you can take them out. You don't have to, but I always do. All right, it looks like our rice is looking good, our zucchini rice mixture. Most of the liquid has cooked out. We'll let it go just a little bit longer. So I turned my heat up a little bit because I was getting impatient. and then it started to cook to the bottom of the pan. So I should have left it at medium, and but that's okay. It'll still taste good, and I can probably scrape that off the bottom. It'll probably be just fine.
Now that all the liquid has been absorbed, you can take the pot off the heat and add in the chickpeas.
And the last thing that goes in is a half a teaspoon of crushed red peppers. Okay, once you have it all mixed together, you can add this mixture to some sort of a casserole dish that's safe to go in the oven. You could leave it in your pan if your pan is safe for the oven, but I'm going to use this pan for something else. So I'm just using a casserole dish for today. Okay, you'll want to add your dish or pot to the oven and cook it at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. I was debating about whether to leave the lid on or take it off. I decided to leave it on for the first half, and then I'm going to take it off halfway through because it still is a little bit liquidy. By the way, I did manage to scrape off the somewhat toasted rice, and it was so tasty. For our side dish, I had some extra green beans and Brussels sprouts, so I'm just going to stir fry those up. First, I'm rinsing the green beans, and then I'll have Ian explain what to do next.
So right now I'm just popping the ends off of the green beans. I'm basically just tearing them off, but they come off pretty easily. So here my mother is just chopping the ends off of the Brussels sprouts and then cutting them in half, just like that.
The zucchini dish has been baking for about 10 minutes. I'm going to pull the lid off just because it had a little bit of liquid in it still, and I'd like it to evaporate. You can decide when you're cooking it whether you think it should be on or off based on how much liquid is in the dish. I'm going to stir fry my vegetables in the same pan that I used, partly because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to wash multiple pots and pans, but also because there's a lot of good flavor in the bottom of this pan, and it would be great if my vegetables would soak up some of that flavor. I'm scraping a little bit of the spices and seasonings off the bottom, just to kind of loosen it up a little bit, but I'm going to leave it all in there for the veggies. Now I'm going to place the Brussels sprouts face down with the flat side down, and I want those in my pot first because I want them to be lined up in the bottom so that the flat part can get a nice glaze. Now I'm just putting the green beans right on top of the Brussels sprouts, and then I'm going to just add the leaves off the Brussels sprouts that fell off just right on top, and I'm adding some salt, of course, and then also some pepper. Next I'm adding some water, and then I'm going to put the lid on so the vegetables can steam, and I'll let them steam for about 5 minutes. And then after the water is pretty well cooked down, I'll take off the lid and just let them sit. I want those Brussels sprouts to be nice and brown on the bottom. As you can see, that one Brussels sprout that I flipped over is just a little bit brown, so it's getting there. Okay, this is after a few more minutes, maybe about 5 more minutes of the Brussels sprouts just being flat after they were steaming. And they started to turn brown, but it also started to bake to the bottom of the pan, so I decided to just go ahead and stir fry them all up and try to scrape off some of that seasoning. I found that if it seems that things are sticking, I can just add some water and that'll help me to get it scraped up. And so that's what I just did, and it worked really well to help get some of that seasoning off the bottom and also to help get the vegetables unstuck. Okay, after about 10 minutes of cooking, 5 minutes steaming, and about 5 minutes stir frying, they are done. I'm just adding some fresh squeezed lemon. A few seeds fell out, but that's okay. I can pull them out. And this looks heavenly. And of course, while you're cooking, make sure that you taste as you go along and make sure that it is seasoned the way that you want it. All right, here's the casserole after I took it out of the oven. I ended up leaving it in a little longer because it looked a little liquidy still, so it cooked for about 30 minutes. My kids prefer raw vegetables, so I threw some raw broccoli on their plate. And then on my plate, I've got those nice caramelized Brussels sprouts. Oh, they look so good.
Did you say?
I said, this is yummy.
Let's see how broken 1 seconds.
Are there more green beans?
That's all of them.